Thanks.
Okay, we're now live.
Super, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the decision days of myself. I'm Councillor Kirsty North, Executive Lead Member for Universal Services, as well as Lulu Baldman, the Executive Member for Highways and Waste. These decision days are being broadcast in one session live on YouTube via the County Council website. So welcome to our members who are in attendance today. I've obviously mentioned Councillor Bauman, but we've got Councillor Rob McCatter and Councillor Jackie Branson, Councillor Tim Groves, Councillor Malcolm Wallace. I don't think I've missed anyone. Oh, and Councillor Jackie Porter, who's just joined as well. So thank you very much for attending. We've had apologies from Councillor Rupert Curl and Councillor Sarah Pankhurst. And I don't know, Katie, if you've had any other apologies.
No other apologies. No.
Super. Thank you very much. So we also don't have any. There's the reprocurement of heating oil and road fuels framework. And I'll ask Patrick if he wants to introduce this one.
Thank you, Councillor North, and good afternoon, everybody. So, as you mentioned, this is the reprocurement of the heating oil and road fuels framework. So it's about approval to procure the new framework and to enter into the new contractual arrangements. So what we're looking for is a spend capacity of £45 million over 4 years. And it's a framework which is used by the County Council, but also a number of other public sector partners. And it is just that, it's a framework agreement which can be drawn down. So in respect of the County Council, it will be drawn down using directorate revenue budgets to fund that. So this is about providing the capacity in the framework itself. I think it's worth saying, and it's also brought out within the report, that we've done a great deal to reduce our draw on fossil fuels, particularly around things like energy efficiency, the public sector decarbonisation programme. And what we're seeing is a driving down of the actual usage of this, and the framework reflects that. And so you'll see within it, it's 2 lots. One is that conventional fuel, and the second one is hydrotreated vegetable oil fuel, which is a substitute for diesel. That's probably all I was intending to say on the paper, Councillor North. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thanks very much, Patrick. And I know obviously it's not necessarily our intention to spend all of that, but to have the budget capacity there should we need it. Would any members attending like to make a comment at all on this one? I see no hands, in which case we can move to, Councillor Wallace.
Yes, thank you. Yes, just to clarify, I'm standing in for Councillor Pankhurst today. So, yeah, just had thank you. I'd like to thank Patrick and the team and Mike for providing a breakdown of the fuel spend. That's outside of this report, but in preparation for this meeting, they kindly provided a breakdown of the fuels, and it's great to see that the council is on a downward curve with the use of fossil fuels. Bit of a way to go, but it's moving in the right direction, which is good. With all, I guess my question today really is more on the overall spend. Given the briefings that we had this morning and the overall position that the council finds itself in right now, is it appropriate for us to be for this amount of budget to be being approved? It's 50% more than the budget over the past 4 years, and yes, I guess the wider, is it appropriate to be approving such a big spend at this time?
Do you want to come in first, Patrick?
Yeah, Councillor, may I respond to that? Thanks very much, Councillor Wallace. This is not about the spend approval. It's not about spending that amount of money. This is about creating the framework, the capacity to spend up to that amount of money. But I absolutely accept the point that it is a significant sum of money. What I would say is we, the County Council, represent a relatively small proportion of the spend we've seen over the last 4 years. And so to an extent, we have control over what we can spend. What we have seen is huge amounts of inflation, lots of other crises around the world at the moment which have driven the costs up, particularly the costs of utilities and the cost of energy. But I think what's within our gift. Oh, forgive me, sorry, I thought the connection dropped out there. What's within our gift is making sure we're as energy efficient as possible, and we will continue to do that. So actually, it's not about spending the 45 million with the county council and its partners. It's about driving down our energy and spending the minimum amount of possible. But this allows us the framework to work within. Thank you.
And I'd absolutely echo that. It's not a target spend of 45 million. It's the ability to spend up to that amount should something happen, an unusual circumstance that would mean that things have amounted to that amount. Any other members who'd like to make a comment? In which case the recommendations, I'm happy to approve them. They are on paragraphs 2 on page 3. So I will approve those. And then we can move to the second item, which is the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Levy Fund for on-street residential electric vehicle charge points. And back to Patrick to introduce this one.
Thank you very much, Councillor North. So you're right, this is the Local EV Infrastructure Fund for on-street residential and EV charge points. So this is about securing and spending the allocation that's been put forward and made available by the Department for Transport, a grant fund of about 6.662 million. And that fund is really about pump priming the market to put on-street residential electric vehicle charging infrastructure in such that it can become sustainable over time. The money is released in 2 stages with DfT, 9% in the first stage and then the final 10% when the contractor arrangements are put in place. But what's really important with this is about, again, the first stage of that is getting the agreement to put those contracts in place. But a key part will be the development of a deployment plan for our key postcodes. And that deployment plan will be developed over time, and it will be based very much on the criteria that the Department for Transport will put in place to maximise the coverage of that EV. So there is a lot of detail set out in the report. I think what will be of interest is when we get the deployment plan in place and what that looks like. But this is about putting the framework in place, if you like. I've joined by Tim Lawton and Philip Shepherd on the call in case there are any sort of technical questions, but that's all I was going to cover by way of presenting the paper. Thank you, Councillor North.
Thanks, Patrick. And I think I've made this point privately, but I would be keen for the Universal Services Select Committee to look at that deployment plan and look at this as an item more specifically, because I think it will be really useful to get members' input in that and for them to be cited on what we'll do, because this will be something that I'm sure will be welcomed by residents all across the county. I've got Councillor Groves, please.
Thank you, Councillor North. I wonder if you could sort of clarify what we mean by pump priming. What sort of actions will be taking place? I understand it will be part of a deployment plan that you'll do. Can you just very briefly clarify whether it is at areas, densely populated areas or less populated areas, that sort of thing? Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Councillor Groves. What I mean by pump prime in this instance, and we've talked about this in the development of the paper, is that when we have a provider on board who can roll out this infrastructure in accordance with the plan that we develop with DfT, it's quite conceivable where there is demand for that infrastructure, which will be paid for by the DfT money, they may decide to go further. They may decide, because it's becomes more commercially viable for them, to put further and even more infrastructure in some of those locations. And that really is about, I suppose, kickstarting and priming that market such that they can do some of that deployment. We saw similar things with the Superfast broadband programme before, where public money was put in to almost prime the private sector to deliver more infrastructure and then make it sustainable. I don't know, Tim or Philip, you wanted to add any further points to that answer?
Nothing from me, Patrick. Phil, did you want to add anything?
No, nothing from me either.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McCatter next, please. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. I've also got a question for Tim, actually two questions really. The first question is, have we attempted to work out that if we are going to put infrastructure into Hampshire, what the total number might look like? I'm trying to get a sense for where this funding sits compared to what the whole total might cost. Is 6.6 million a lot of money, or is it a tiny proportion of what it might cost? So just trying to scale that. And the other thing I don't quite pick up from the papers what this infrastructure actually is. Do we know that yet, or is that going to be part of the deployment plan, is working out exactly what we have to put in place to deliver infrastructure? Thank you.
Could I ask, Councillor, could I ask both Tim and Phil if they want to provide a response to those, if I may?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Councillor North. I mean, I'll have a go at answering that question, Councillor McCatter, and I'll bring Phil in if that's okay, Phil. So, £6 million, that will fund approximately 8,000 charges. And if you wanted to know the total number of charges that we've got across Hampshire, we can probably get that information to you. I don't know what it is. Phil might do, but that would obviously be a combination of fast chargers that are commercially operated, and you'll be aware that some of the fuel companies are now moving into this space. That when you go into a petrol station, a lot of the forecourts now got high-speed chargers, so that will cater for a certain part of the EV market. What we're talking about here is putting chargers into areas where people can't charge on their driveways, and it may be what's holding them back from buying an electric vehicle is they've got no mechanism to charge it locally to where they live. And in time, this funding will only last for a finite period, but where the and Phil, please do correct me if I'm wrong on this, where our concessionaire sees that there are commercial opportunities to put more chargers in, then they will be able to do that if there's more demand identified. In terms of what will it look like, I mean, it will be low current chargers, so it won't be fast chargers. It will be no more than 7 kilowatt chargers, similar to what you might get at home, and that will be limited by the infrastructure that's already in place. So if you've got lots of chargers in a road and everyone wants to charge at the same time, then the electricity flow will drop, so it'll be less than 7 kilowatts. So I'm not sure whether that answers your questions or has created sort of more questions in your mind. But Phil, is anything you wanted to add that I may have missed?
No, but I think the question Councillor McCarter had about the total number, it's something I can follow up after this meeting, because it is a forecast at the moment by government based on a number of variables. So we're initially forecasting around about 8,500 over the next 5 years for residential, the standard slow overnight charges, if you like. But the broader number is something I will have to give a response after this committee.
Thank you. I think Tim's pretty much answered my question. That the 6.6 million probably doesn't include a lot of different infrastructure to what we have in place. It's just effectively putting in charges onto whatever infrastructure we have. So it doesn't involve putting in different types of streetlights, different electricity networks, anything like that. That is totally outside the scope of what it is. And that answered my question. So thank you for that.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Wallace, please.
All right, thanks. Yeah, obviously, I'm fully supportive of this scheme. It's great to see the county council getting fully engaged in this. And after discussions we've had the other day, it's great to see the deployment plan being put together, and that will be taken to committee. That's really important because there's a lot of complicated elements to that. One thing that we did talk about is the price that the electricity will be charged at. I know when I charge my one of the advantages of having an electric vehicle is it's over the lifetime it's cheaper to run, and part of that is because if you fill it up at night like I do, you pay 7p a unit, 7p a kilowatt for the electricity, and you save a fortune on your fuel bill. So as part of the deployment plan, please can the price that we are going to charge residents or residents are going to be charged, however it works with these companies. Could that be I think that's a really important part of any deployment plan, is considering the costs that we charge our residents. Because if we charge some of the commercial charges that are out there right now, the price for charging there means it costs the same to fill up on electricity as it does on petrol, and that doesn't make any sense for an electric vehicle. If you can get the price down, then it makes economic sense, as well as sense for the environment to switch. So yeah, please can that be considered as part of it? Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Wallace, and thank you, Councillor Wallace. And I know that Councillor Wallace and I and other colleagues have had a number of discussions on this. I think it's worth saying that it's still quite early stages at the moment. We're in the foothills of looking at what that deployment plan looks like, and I think some really well-made points have been done about things that we need to consider as part of that deployment plan. Of course, part of that will be the tariffs, the costs of actually running and charging from those particular points. So we will pick that up, and we will certainly come back to members with more details as that develops. Thank you.
Thanks. If there are no further comments, I see no hands, but just interject if you want to speak. In which case we can move to the recommendations. They're in paragraphs 2 to 5 on page 11, and I'm very happy to approve those. So the final item for me today is the appointments to outside bodies. These are on pages 19 and 20 of the agenda. It's always a little odd when you're appointing yourself to things, but this is just because of the changes in the composure of the cabinet and some of the sort of administrative changes that we need to sort out. So it's a little odd, but that's where we are. So I can confirm that the Ashford Hangers Consultative Group, Councillor Russell Oppenheimer will remain on that one as local member. The new Basingstoke Canal Joint Board will have representation from Councillor Rod Cooper and Councillor Stephen Parker. The Hampshire Rural Forum will be myself as Executive Lead Member. The Project Integra Strategic Board will be Councillor Lulu Bauman and myself as the Deputy. And the Solent Transport will have myself as Executive Lead Member with Lulu Bauman as the Deputy. So if I can now hand over to Lulu for her part of the decision day. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lulu Bauman. I'm the Executive Member for Highways and Waste, and thank you for attending my virtual decision day today, which continues to be webcast on YouTube via the County Council website. I have no public deputations today, but Councillor Jackie Porter, I believe, is here to speak on both items 4 and 5. So welcome, Jackie. Is she on the screen? Okay. The first item, item 4, is the project appraisal for Worthy Road in Winchester, the pedestrian and cycle improvements. And this is phase 1, and in the papers it's pages 21 to 40. I'd like to invite Councillor Jackie Porter to speak now if she'd like to. On item 4.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm very grateful because having watched this morning, the power on my machine is dying and I can't get it to speed up fast enough. So hopefully I'll last long enough. First of all, I have to declare a register of interest. Winchester City Council is one of the funders of this project, so and I'm also a City Council member. I'm also I'm asking a number of questions during this, but also asking questions on behalf of children too, in my role as the spokesperson for children. So I fully support the principle of the practical works described in the paper, which will be enabled by this decision day. It's been a long time in the making and definitely worthwhile. But the costs don't just include phase 1, but as paragraph 2 states, the estimated phase 1 scheme cost also includes the cost of design and development of phase 2 project to the completion of the preliminary design stage, which takes it through my division. So I was a bit disappointed to see the word aspiration when it describes what's going to go on in paragraph 15, not the intention to continue this work. And I really do hope that it actually is the intention to continue this improved cycleway, which is such a key part, and it's a primary route on the LC WIP. The caveats in paragraph 15 are a little bit disappointing. Residents in Winchester will definitely benefit from the works you do before you today. Absolutely 100% support that. But is there any doubt for the rest of the need for the rest of the scheme? They're currently, cyclists are using a piece of footway, which is a shared footway and cycleway, which is inferior in quality, and has been really one of the drivers towards this being a primary route for the LC WIP. But the new scheme will provide a direct non-road link between Kings Barton and Abbots Barton. I like to call it the Barton Superhighway or Super Bikeway, and then onto the lower part of the city. This is one of the LC WIP cycle lanes that will lead to one point. So my first question is really, to encourage a child to use active travel is to enable them to become active for life. So I'm urging Hampshire County Council to check out this whole route for safety. Do you support my view that all cycle routes, particularly those receiving active travel and SIL funding, should be suitable for an 11-year-old to ride alone? Because I hope that's what our aspiration is for these cycle routes. And also, what provision will be made for this Barton Super Bikeway to be used after dark? And my final question is really, what progress has been made with Network Rail to enable the surface of the cycle path under the main line, the main train line, to be constructed to the same standards as the other paths on the route? Currently, it's gravel and the rest of it's tarmac, which makes it quite dangerous when you're going underneath the main line and travelling at speed. And it's just not really very suitable. But it's hampered at the moment by being a mainline route. So what progress is being made to get that to be constructed to the same standard? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. That's very, very good, Jackie. Patrick, I don't know if you'd like to take either all or each one of those three questions raised. How would we like to proceed with this?
Thank you, Councillor Bowman, and thank you, Councillor Porter. Really, as always, really helpful and insightful questions. There's some detail in here we may need to take away and look at some of those, particularly around Network Rail, and what we can do for those is make sure that we give you a written response on those, Councillor Porter, so you can see the progress that's been made. What I would just say for question one about encouraging children to use it and the safety of those, I mean, you'll see within the paper there's quite a lot of safety measures that have taken place in terms of the assessment for that. I mean, we talk about the width of the carriageway and so on, and the width of the paths themselves to maximise that. So there's been a number of considerations for safety. But what I may do is just ask colleagues to give you a bit more detail on that and what provisions have been made. And I think that can also answer your second point about the provisions after dark. So using it as, particularly as we get into winter, as it gets darker, and therefore we can still encourage use of that. But certainly on the Network Rail one, we'd like to come back to you with a bit more detail. I don't know, Tim and James, whether you want to provide any further detail now.
I think James is on the call, Patrick. So
okay.
James.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Yes, the detail relating to using it after dark, the scheme does include upgrades to the street lighting within the phase 1 section that we're looking at as part of this paper. So there is a lighting upgrade on the section in question. I think the comments relating to the sections of the route further to the north and further to the south are elements that we'll need to go away and have another look at and get back to you separately on that.
If I may interject, I mean, I know that it doesn't have any lighting really from the development of Kings Barton itself until it gets to Stoke Road and Abbots Barton, and that's my concern, that it actually is an absolutely brilliant route, but it doesn't have any lighting at the moment, and that's my challenge really, back to the team. I've raised it with David Jowsey probably 2 years ago, that actually we need a low-level scheme that's adoptable for lighting on these sort of cycleways and long-term, and we haven't really made any progress on that, which is a bit disappointing. But the scheme itself will be well lit, and that's important, and in this decision day today.
Thank you. Any further comments on the questions that were raised? We've covered them all, I think, haven't we? Are you satisfied, Councillor Porter? Are you happy?
Yeah, I think I'm sure you would like it as well, Councillor Bowman, that we think of all of these new bikeways that we're creating to be suitable for a child that's passed their cycling proficiency, which they can usually take in year 5, to actually be using by the time they go to secondary school. Because that's really the aim of all of these, to be to a point where active travel starts early and becomes a lifetime habit.
Yeah, I support you on that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any? Oh, sorry, Patrick. Would you like to introduce the report now? Sorry, we had Councillor Porter's deputation first.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I think we've probably covered quite a lot of detail in the report. I mean, I think the report sets out what the proposals are by way of the footways and the pedestrian and cycling improvements. It talks about footways and the crossing facilities as part of that. It sets out also some of the challenges that we've seen in respect, and I touched on it earlier in my response, about the width of the carriageway and the width of the footways, trying to maximise both the pedestrian and the cycleways and minimise the impact in taking additional space on the side of that. And we've been able to work through that very, very carefully. And I think the last point within the paper itself, it talks about the funding sources for this, where the funding is going to come from, whether it's Section 106, the SIL funding, but also the Active Travel Fund Tranche 4. So I think the detail is set out in the paper, and I think it's been helpful for Councillor Porter to pick up some of those specific points, and we will undertake to come back on those very specific points as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Would any other members in attendance like to ask a question or make a comment on this item? I see none. Okay, thank you very much. In which case, I'll progress to the recommendations, which are in paragraphs 2 to 6 on pages 21, 22, and I'm happy to approve them. Thank you. So moving on again in the same area of Winchester, we're looking at the local bus contract in item 5 for Kings Barton on pages 41 to 48. And once again, Councillor Porter, if you'd like to speak on this item.
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Griffin-Thorne at the County Council for his determination and flexibility on this. We have been working on this for what seems like years, and it is years, but we've got to a point today of a decision day, which is fantastic news. And the County Council has agreed to release S106 funding of £120,000 a year for 2 years, with a potential up to 3 years. It's CALA money, the developers' money, but it's come through an S106 to the County Council, and because we couldn't get a decent contract with any commercial bus company, it's gone to Community First, which is absolutely fantastic. The really interesting thing is that in the paper, it's got, it's really positive for people who are pregnant, they're involved in rurality, poverty, age, disability, so it definitely ticks the equalities impact box. But the conversation in the paper keeps describing what happens if it's not successful. Hopefully it will be successful and it won't stop, because the big issue with finding a commercial service for this was actually knowing how many people are likely to use it. And so I really hope that we can watch the use of this really carefully and see what we can do to continue to be flexible, because it's a service designed so that it can be flexible, so that we can. My question really is, how flexible can we be to make sure that we make this into a success and not a failure?
Patrick, would you like to come in on that point?
Indeed, and I think it tees up the introduction of the paper, but I'll respond to that very specific point. So I was going to cover it in my introduction of the paper. I think Councillor Porter, you hit the nail on the head. This is about putting it in place, but the key is also making it sustainable. How can we have a sustainable service for this? And part of that sustainability, because it's one-off money for 2 years, as you say, plus the potential for a 3rd year, I think is that real engagement with the community, making sure we get patronage up, making sure we and the community can demonstrate to the operators that it is a viable proposition going beyond the time frame which we put out. So that's certainly the intention of the paper, and beyond the paper is how we make that position sustainable going forward.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to say I'm delighted that it has been driven by the working group with, parish councillors, people like yourself and the county. So I think because of how it's instigated, I hope it will continue in the strong community vein that it has started. So it's a good project.
And importantly, the residents too. Can I give them
absolutely? Yeah, and the working groups, but sort of that they're almost representing the residents, aren't they? They're getting the feedback from the residents and things. So no, I take your point, Councillor Porter, but I recognise that as well. So
thank you.
Patrick, you believe that you've covered your report? You're happy with that? Yes. No other comments?
I think so, and I would just also thank Councillor Porter for the words on Mike and the team, Mike Griffin Thorne, who's been instrumental in developing this proposal. So thank you for that. But other than that, I've probably got nothing further to add in terms of the introduction of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members on the call would like to make a comment at all? Councillor Wallace.
Just wanted to reiterate. Obviously, active travel and bus services, public transport are critical to us to achieving our goal of on our greenhouse gas emissions, and so making sure that this is a successful service and continues to grow is really important. I've spoken previously with other previous meetings where this hasn't actually been successful at other locations, so I'm hoping that with the community engagement that this has started off with and all the positive noises that we're having, that hopefully this will be more successful, and then we can take the lessons from here and apply them perhaps to other places where it has been not so successful so far. But yes, it's a really important part of what we need to be doing going forward, so very pleased to see this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Branson, Jackie.
Very much on the same lines. We hope this is successful, but we all know that sometimes it isn't. And I'm just concerned, when you withdraw something like this at the end of the 2 or possibly 3 years and it's not working, that's my only concern. But I mean, that doesn't stop us wanting to go ahead with it now.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Groves, Tim.
Thank you, Councillor Baumann. I'm really speaking on behalf of Councillor Todd, who's just emailed both you and me, Councillor Baumann.
Yes, indeed.
So can I read it out on his behalf?
I'm happy if you'd like to, as long as it's not too long.
Yes, it's not only 4 lines on my screen.
Anyway. Oh, well, okay, absolutely fine. Thank you.
I strongly support this initiative. Having a first-class cycling and walking route from Kingsworthy to Winchester and from Kingsbarton to the city centre is vitally important for the city's long-term active travel and movement strategy. This initiative is an essential step. The crossing will make the route suitable to young and old, whether walking, cycling or on a bus, in a way that isn't the case now. And the improvements on Worthy Lane itself, as well as the design for the whole route, are an important first step to getting the Worthies the route it deserves. I look forward to this being delivered and continuing to seek funding and support to complete the route as a whole. So I think strong support from Councillor Todd there. Thank you.
That was in fact for number 1.
I was just
the previous one, but it's the principle is we're going to get Kingsbarton residents walking and cycling and busing rather than carring. I think that's the key part for this decision day.
Yeah, well, we're getting a very positive feeling about today, aren't we?
Yeah. So it sounds like you made the right decision for your first decision.
Yes, do assure Councillor Todd that my first decision for my first decision day was fantastic. So all positive. Thank you. Any further comments on this item? Shall we say item 5, the local bus contract?
Could I just interject that actually it says it's for Westgate. It's actually implies it's a Winchester councillor decision. Actually, Councillor Warwick and has also in fact affected by this, as am I. We're all part of the same. It's an area that's got 4 county council divisions in it rather than just 2.
Okay.
As stated on the paper.
We'll make a note of that if we may.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no further comments to be made, I'm happy to proceed to the recommendations in paragraphs 2 to 3 on page 41. And I'm very supportive and very pleased to have these 2 items on this decision day. So thank you. It's a great news story. And I'd like to thank everybody who's attended today. And Katie, if we may stop the webcast now, if that's okay.